Arger.
One word, whispered
Better
in
death
the
than
dark,
dishonor.
could tear a man's world apart. Among the Vikings, that word was
Before the
Arger.
sagas
Before
came the
the
law.
Thing, the Council of Law, that word meant exile or death.
Cast adrift
Better
into the
blood on the
storm.
snow than shame upon your name. Cast into the storm, alone
Memory
against
erased.
gods
Honor
and
gone.
sea.
But the gods still watched.
Imagine this. One single word soft as a whisper, sharp as a blade, could unravel everything you were. Your honor, your legal rights, even your memory. Among the Vikings, that word was Arger. But before we dive into the sagas and the long-forgotten laws, let's do something I always love with you. Where are you listening from right now? What city? What corner of the world? And what time is it where you are? It always amazes me to see people commenting. It's 2 a.m. here in Tokyo, or listening on a bus ride home in Dublin, or I'm drifting to sleep in Toronto, midnight. Different time zones, but all of us sharing one story. I check those comments, by the way, every single one. So if you don't mind, let me know. And if these slow, strange stories help you unwind, if they help you fall asleep, or just pass a quiet evening, I'd be so grateful if you tap, like, or subscribe to the channel. It's a small thing, but it keeps this campfire glowing and lets me keep telling you these tales. Really, thank you for simply being here. That's already more than enough. Now, let's step into the Viking world. The weight of a word, Arger. It wasn't just an insult. It was a social weapon, a single syllable that sliced deeper than steel. For the Norse, masculinity wasn't just admired. It was law. It was honor. It was spiritual currency. Their entire code of life was built on a man's ability to stand strong, to fight, to defend his name. And Arger tore through that. To be called unmanly, effeminate, morally twisted, it meant you had violated the sacred code. You weren't simply weak. You were polluted. In their eyes, you had crossed into a place where you no longer deserved protection. It's strange, isn't it, that a word could carry that much weight? And yet, don't we live in a world where words trend and spiral into hashtags that can destroy lives? Think of it. You say one thing online. Maybe you didn't mean it. Maybe it was misquoted. But suddenly there it is circulating in a storm, your name tagged with labels like for or fraud, mar liar, war for cancelled. By the time you try to explain, the tide has already turned. For the Vikings, that tide was the word Arger, the forest beyond. And here's the chilling part. Being called Arger didn't just bruise your reputation, it erased you. Viking law had a punishment called utla graut laurai. And if you think that means a fun life as a rogue adventurer, think again. Outlawry meant this. You were banished, but not to another land. You were banished from being human. You couldn't step into a hall. You couldn't sit by a fire. You couldn't even accept a piece of bread from your own mother. From that moment, you were treated like a ghost that still happened to breathe. Some were hunted, some starved. Many simply disappeared into the forests. The sagas called it skogangra, literally, going into the forest. To us it sounds poetic. To them it was a death sentence. Can you picture it? You once feasted in a crowded longhouse, laughter echoing, ale spilling over carved wooden cups. Thensilence. No one looks at you. No one speaks your name. You walk into the cold, and the door closes behind you. And the cruelest part? Even your memory is outlawed. The echo today. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's brutal, but it was 1,000 years ago. We're better now, are we? Think about cancel culture. Think about people we no longer name the celebrities, the politicians, the neighbors down the street who vanished after one viral story. Their accounts deleted, their names scrubbed from feeds, their pictures turned into memes, their stories cut off mid-sentence. The forest may not be made of pine and birch anymore. But we've built digital forests, silent and endless, where people wander after society has cast them out. And sometimes, we're the ones with the torches, cheering as they go. The slow path ahead. Tonight, we're not rushing. This isn't a sprint through a history textbook. This is a walk-along, slow walk through the forests of the Viking world. Every tree we pass holds a story. Every wind through the branches carries an echo of the men who once lived and were then erased. So get comfortable. Really adjust your pillow. Pull the blanket up. Let the room go quiet. Because by the end of this journey, we'll realize something unsettling. The Vikings weren't just punishing men with words and laws. They were holding up a mirror. And when we look into it, from the safety of our glowing screens, we may not like what we see staring back. Have you ever noticed how some words don't really translate? They carry too much baggage, too many shadows, to squeeze into a neat dictionary entry. For the Vikings, Argur was one of those words. On the surface, people sometimes translate it as unmanly, but that doesn't even scratch the ice on a Nordic fjord. Argur was heavier than that. It was layered like a curse, a legal charge, and a death sentence all rolled into one. Layers of the insult first. There was cowardice in battle. In Viking culture, a man's worth was tested with steel. If you flinched, if you ran, if you didn't step into the shield wall when called, someone could whisper Argur. And that whisper could end you faster than a sword through the gut. But it wasn't just battlefield courage. Argur also meant stepping into roles that society saw as wrong for men. That could mean being passive in same-gender relationships, yes. The Vikings talked about that. It could mean taking on certain kinds of household roles that were considered beneath a warrior. And most intriguingly, it could mean practicing a certain kind of magic. Seder, the magic of shame. Seder was a form of prophecy and manipulation spells that bent the threads of fate. Women could practice it with respect, but for men, it was taboo. Picture this. In a smoky hut, a woman sits chanting, weaving visions of the future. People come to her for guidance, for healing, for insight. She's honored for it. Now picture a man doing the same thing. He's not honored. He's whispered about. He's called Argur. Why? Because in their eyes, he's stepping into a feminine role, breaking the sacred mold of Viking masculinity. Even Odin the Allfather himself was accused of it. Yes, Odin, king of the gods, one-eyed wanderer, raven keeper, the one who hung on the world tree for 9 nights to snatch wisdom from the jaws of death. Even he wasn't safe. In Snorri Sturluson's Ynglinga saga, Odin is accused of unmanliness because he practiced cedar. Think about that. If a god, the ultimate warrior king, could be called Argur, what chance did a farmer, a fisherman, or a soldier have? It's almost funny, in a tragic way. The Vikings worshipped a god who could be insulted under his own laws. Imagine being a fan of Superman, but every time he used heat vision, someone shouted, "You're breaking the rules, Clark." The dual Holmganga. Now here's the kicker. If someone called you Argur, you had one honorable choice: fight. The ritual duel, the Holmganga. 2 men, often on an island or marked ground. One chance to defend your name with steel. Refuse the duel, and you were guilty. Instantly. There was no middle ground, no appeals court, no clever lawyer to twist the wording. Either you fought, or you admitted the word was true. And if you admitted it well, your life might technically continue, but your honor was already buried. A mirror to modern times. Doesn't it feel familiar? Someone makes an accusation. Maybe it's on social media. Maybe it's in a news headline. You can fight it, or you can stay silent. But silence is read as guilt. Today, we don't fight with axes on a forest clearing. We fight with screenshots, statements, shaky apology videos filmed in living rooms, and still, the court of public opinion rarely forgives. Arger was their hashtag, their brand, their scarlet letter. Slowing down together. I know this is heavy stuff. We're moving slowly because the Vikings themselves lived with this slowness. Disputes weren't just words, they stretched into seasons, into years of feuds, into sagas that outlived the men themselves. So take a breath with me. Notice your room, the quiet hum of your lamp. Maybe you're already half asleep, eyelids tugging down. That's okay, let the story wash over you. And while you're here, if this strange little corner of history is keeping you company, consider giving the video a like. It's a simple thing, but it tells me these long journeys are worth making together. Looking ahead. So now we know. Argar wasn't just one insult. It was a layered curse, cowardice, gender transgression, forbidden magic, and it came with a demand, fight or be erased. But what happened if you lost that duel? Or worse, what if you refused to fight at all? That's where the true horror begins. Outlawry, Skoganger, the forest. And that's where we'll wander in the next part. So, what happened if you couldn't shake off that one deadly word, Arger? What if you lost the duel, or worse, refused it altogether? That's when the law struck its final blow. The punishment was utlagrautlari, a word that sounds almost adventurous in English, doesn't it? Outlaw. Makes you think of a lone cowboy riding into the sunset, whistling with a smile. But for the Vikings, outlawry wasn't freedom. It wasn't Robin Hood. It wasn't romantic. It was erasure. The sentence. Skoganger. The harshest form of outlawry was called Skoganger literally, going into the forest. And if that phrase sounds almost poetic, don't let it fool you. It was a death sentence, permanent banishment, complete severance from society. Once the judgment was passed, you had to leave. Every farm, every fishing village, every settlement. You couldn't step inside a home. You couldn't share a fire. You couldn't accept food, even from your own family. Can you imagine that? Your mother reaches for you with bread in her hand. And she has to stop. Not because she doesn't love you, but because the law says you are no longer a man. From that moment, you were something else, something less. The sagas tell us, once branded an outlaw, a man was likened to a wolf. Same varg sem ulfur I skogith, same as a wolf in the forest, a beast to be hunted. Life as a ghost. What was it like? You wandered. Cold. Alone. Watching smoke rise from the longhouses you could never enter again. You might sleep under trees or in caves or in the ruins of abandoned huts. And the cruel part was not just hunger or cold. It was the knowledge that every human face you saw could be your killer. The law said anyone could strike you down. Not only that they would be praised for it, sometimes they'd even be rewarded, allowed to claim what little property you left behind. So imagine it. You see a figure on the path. Is it a stranger, an old friend, a cousin? It doesn't matter. Any of them might lift an axe, and the law would smile. You were no longer a man. You were prey. Modern echoes. Digital forests. Now pause a moment. Doesn't this sound familiar in a strange, modern way? Today, we don't banish people into the physical woods, but we do something eerily close. One headline, one post, and suddenly, someone is unfollowed, unfriended, erased. They're blocked on social media, removed from group chats. Their name whispered only as a warning, don't be like them. And so they wander not through pine forests, but through digital silence. 1,000 eyes that used to see them now look away. No fire, no bread, no voice. The forest has changed, but the loneliness? That part stayed. The cruelty of memory. For the outlaw, death was not the worst part. Death, after all, was quick. The cruelest punishment was memory, or rather the absence of memory. Outlaws were erased from genealogies, their names cut out like rotten branches from a family tree. Even their kin had to pretend they'd never existed, because carrying their memory was carrying shame. Think about that. Not only are you gone, but the very sound of your name is forbidden. Your descendants grow up not knowing you. Your story ends not in blood, but in silence. In Viking belief, memory was immortality. Cattle die, kinsmen die, says the Havamal, but a noble name never dies. Unless, of course, that name was outlawed. Then it died before your body ever did. Slowing down together. I know this part is heavy, so let's take a breath. Notice the quiet of your room again. Maybe the rhythm of your breathing. Maybe the way your blanket feels against your skin. These stories are old, but they're not told to frighten you. They're told to remind us that history isn't gone. It lingers, it whispers. And if you're still awake, still with me in this dark little corner of time, maybe tap the like button. It's like tossing another log onto the fire. Keeps the warmth going, keeps the circle alive. Looking ahead. So far, we've seen what Arger meant, and the brutal exile that followed. But what about the families? What happened to the kin of a man branded outlaw? Were they spared? Or did the shame seep into their bloodline, poisoning generations? That's where we'll go next. Into the homes left behind, into the families forced to carry or erase the memory of a dishonored man. When a man was branded Arger and cast into the forest, the punishment didn't end with him. It reached into his home, his hearth, his children. Dishonor, in Viking culture, was contagious. Cut from the tree. The sagas tell us families often erased the dishonored from their genealogies. It wasn't an accident, was deliberate. His name, once spoken with pride, was cut away as cleanly as a branch from a tree. Think about that. Your family gathers around the fire. They recite their ancestors' warriors, farmers, chieftains. Your father's name, your grandfather's name. And then there's a silence, a missing link where your uncle, your brother, your cousin should have been. That silence was the punishment. For a Viking, ancestry was not a hobby. It was identity. To hear your name recited in the sagas was to live forever. To be cut out was to die twice. The poison of shame. But erasure wasn't enough. The stain spread. If you were descended from a dishonored man, your chances at marriage could collapse. Who would give their daughter to a family touched by shame? Land inheritance could shrink. Political alliances could dry up. It was as if the dishonor was a disease, passed through the bloodline, and everyone knew it. The law was merciless, but society was harsher still. Imagine growing up under that shadow. A child being told, "Don't speak his name." A young woman being rejected because her uncle was once Arger. A son realizing his father's dishonor had already stolen his future. Modern echoes families under the spotlight. Do we still do this today? Oh yes. When someone is cancelled in our world, it's not just them. Their families often feel it. Children of disgraced politicians, partners of disgraced celebrities. Sometimes even friends lose jobs by association. We whisper, we distance ourselves, we click unfollow. Not because they sinned, but because we fear the stain of proximity. The Vikings carved it into law. We carve it into trending hashtags. Different tools, same instinct. A story in the silence. I want you to picture this. A family saga, read aloud at a feast, a long hall, torches crackling, shadows dancing on the walls. Every ancestor's name spoken with pride until one is left out. The listeners nod. They understand. The missing man has been erased. No one asks why. The silence itself tells the story. And in that silence, a deeper pain grows. For the family, not the outlaw. Because they know their pride has been thinned, their branches pruned. The lonely future. This wasn't just about personal shame. It was about survival. Families depended on alliances, on marriages, on ties that kept farms safe and clans strong. To have dishonor in your bloodline was to be weaker in every negotiation, to risk being left behind when others advanced. It meant your descendants might always be looking over their shoulders, carrying a weight they never chose. And so families erased. They cut away sons, brothers, fathers, as if by forgetting, the poison might be contained. But memory is stubborn. Erasure always leaves scars. Slowing down together. It's heavy, isn't it, to think dishonor could echo for generations. So let's take a small pause. Notice your breath again. Maybe the hum of the room around you. If you're listening in bed, maybe let yourself sink a little deeper into the pillow. And if you're still awake, thank you for being here. Truly. If these long, quiet dives into forgotten history bring you comfort, consider subscribing. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. It always amazes me, seeing the map of our little midnight community spread across the world. Looking ahead. So far, we've seen how a man could be erased, and how his family might carry the silence of his shame. His name cut away like a rotten branch, his descendants forced to live under a shadow they never chose. But not every outlaw faded quietly into that silence. Some names slipped through the cracks of erasure. Some survived, preserved in sagas, whispered in halls, remembered because their fates were too strange, too haunting to forget. Men who wandered the wilderness, men hunted like wolves, men who lived years as prey in a world that no longer called them human. And one of those names was Grettir. You've heard of Grettir, haven't you? Grettir Asmundarson. His story stretches like a shadow across the Icelandic sagas. Condemned, exiled, hunted. He lived the outlaw's fate for nearly 2 decades, and unlike most who perished quickly, Grettir endured. But the longer he survived, the more inhuman he became in the eyes of society. Life as prey imagine, waking every morning not in a home, but under the trees, the earth your mattress, the wind your blanket. Every sound pricks your ears. The crack of a twig, could be a deer, could be a neighbor, could be a man coming to claim your life. You know every face you see might carry an axe, and the law itself will applaud them for swinging it. The sagas say Grettir fought like a beast, warding off attackers, killing some. But even in victory, he lost. Because every battle only proved the point. He was no longer part of the human circle. He was a wolf among wolves. The loneliness of the outlaw, death by cold, death by hunger, death by isolation. These were the companions of the outlaw. And perhaps the cruelest part? The knowledge that no rituals would be performed when he finally fell. No names spoken at gatherings, no story sung to children. The outlaw wandered alive, but in the law's eyes, he was already dead. The sagas describe it in chilling terms, as a wolf in the forest. And truly, that's what outlawry was. It stripped away your humanity and recast you as prey. Modern echoes, the digital hunt. It might feel distant, all this talk of forests and wolves. But think for a moment about our own world. When someone today is cast out by public opinion, what happens? They might still breathe, still live in their city, still sit in their own house. But their names vanish from feeds, their voices silenced. Strangers mock them openly, and sometimes mobs form not with spears and axes, but with comment sections, trending hashtags, and relentless ridicule. The hunt continues. Only the tools have changed. The psychological punishment. And here is where Viking law showed its true cruelty. It wasn't the wolves or the cold that killed most outlaws. It was the slow, crushing weight of knowing that everyone, everywhere, had permission to harm you. Imagine the paranoia, the exhaustion, the endless waiting. Not knowing if the next dawn would bring frostbite, hunger, or the blow of an axe. The sagas tell us some outlaws lived for years. Grettir himself fought on, scarred and weathered, until he finally fell. But even then, his story carried the mark of warning. This is what happens when you are cast out. Slowing down together. Let's pause here. Maybe you're lying in bed, eyes heavy. Maybe you're listening on a long train ride, watching the scenery blur past. Wherever you are, thank you for wandering into this forest of stories with me. And if you're still awake, still here, maybe tap like, or drop a comment telling me where in the world you're listening from. I always check. It amazes me that while I whisper of Vikings in the dark, someone across the planet is drifting off to the same rhythm. Looking ahead. We've seen what outlawry did to the man himself, the loneliness, the paranoia, the endless hunt. But the sagas also tell us about the deeper wound, erasure not just in life, but in death. Because for a Viking, true immortality was not in the body, but in the name. And for the dishonored, that immortality was denied. So next, we'll step from the cold forests into the halls of memory, into the Havamal, into the belief that to lose your name was to lose eternity itself. The Vikings believed something simple and devastatingly true. Cattle die, kinsmen die, and so one dies oneself. But a name could live forever. This wasn't just poetry. It was law. It was belief. To the Norse, memory was immortality. The sound of your name, carried on the lips of your children, spoken at the fire, etched in sagas, that was the closest thing to eternity. And so, for the dishonored man, outlawry was more than exile. It was annihilation of memory. The erased name families didn't just whisper less about the outlaw, they cut him away entirely. Genealogies, those precious lists of ancestors, skipped his name. Sagas erased him like he had never existed. Picture this. A skald stands in the longhouse, harp in hand, voice echoing against the beams. He recites the lineage of a proud family. Generations of warriors and farmers, one after another, weaving pride into the hall. And then there's a gap, a silence, a missing name. No one asks why. The silence itself is the answer. That man has been erased, the double death. And that erasure was worse than death itself. For a Viking, to die in battle meant your deeds could be sung, your name carved in runes, your story etched into stone. But for the dishonored, there would be no songs, no stones, no memory. It was a double death, once in the body and once in the name. Modern echoes. The digital afterlife. And now, let's step quietly into our own world. Think about how much of ourselves lives in memory today. Photos on Instagram, status updates, tweets, videos, our names, searchable, tagged, spoken across the web. And think about how quickly it can vanish. Accounts deleted. Posts scrubbed, friends unfollowing. Suddenly, the trail of memory we thought permanent dissolves. One click, and a person who once filled your feed can be gone. The Vikings would have understood this perfectly. They didn't need computers to know how terrifying it is to lose your name. The comfort of being remembered. I want you to pause for a moment. Think of someone in your life who is gone, but whose name you still speak. Maybe a grandparent, a friend, a teacher. Saying their name keeps them alive in a small way. That's what the Vikings believed. That was their immortality, and that's why outlawry was so cruel it stripped even that small comfort away. Slowing down together. Take a deep breath with me. Notice your space again. The lamp glow, the hum of night, maybe the weight of the blanket as you settle deeper. These stories are heavy, but they're not told to weigh you down. They're told to remind us of what endures. And if you're still awake, thank you for carrying these names with me. If this story has a place in your night, maybe tap the like button or subscribe so we can keep walking these quiet paths together. And please, tell me in the comments, whose name do you still carry? Whose memory lives because you speak it? Looking ahead. So far, we've wandered through exile and erasure. We've seen men erased from memory and families forced to prune their trees. But here's the question. Why did the Vikings make masculinity so rigid, so unforgiving, that a single accusation could topple it all? What was this fortress of manhood built from? And why did they guard it so mercilessly? That's where we'll go next. Into the iron code of Viking masculinity, the laws, the violence, the brotherhood, and the blade. For the Vikings, masculinity was not just a trait, it was a fortress, built from steel, from blood, from brotherhood. Every stone in that fortress was held together by one mortar, honor. The walls of steel. Picture the shield wall, warriors standing shoulder to shoulder, shields overlapping, spears bristling forward. Behind that wall was more than flesh. Behind it was an idea. A man was worth only as much as his courage, his loyalty, his readiness to fight. To falter was to break the wall. To break the wall was to endanger everyone. And so masculinity was guarded as if it were a fortress under siege. The rules were clear. The penalties merciless. The blade that cut both ways. This fortress protected. It bound men together. It inspired loyalty. It defended farms and families against enemies. But the same blade that defended the clan could turn inward. Accusations of argur were like cracks in the wall. And when the crack appeared, the fortress did not mend it. It destroyed the stone. A man could be cast out, erased, hunted not by foreign invaders, but by his own kin, his own neighbors, the very fortress he had once guarded. The Iron Code. The code was simple. A man must be strong. A man must fight. A man must defend his honor even to the death. No wealth, no skill, no noble ancestry could save you if you failed to live by that code. Even kings, even gods like Odin, were not safe. And once the word Stuckagur there was no shield. only one last choice: fight in the Holmganga, or walk silently into exile. Modern echoes masculinity today. It's easy to think we've outgrown this, but haven't we built new fortresses? Today, men are still measured by unspoken codes. Be tough. Don't show weakness. Don't step outside the lines. And when someone does, society whispers. Labels, hashtags, mockery. The walls may look different, but the fortress still stands. And just like the Viking version, sometimes it protects, but often it turns inward and destroys its own. The prey among wolves. For the Vikings, there were only two kinds of men: wolves among wolves or prey, and prey had no place in the sagas. No songs, no stones, no memory. This was the merciless heart of their code. To fail as a man was not just to fail yourself. It was to fail your kin, your gods, your ancestors. And failure had no forgiveness. Slowing down together. Take a moment here. Let the weight of that sink in. Imagine living every day inside that fortress, knowing one crack in your armor could erase you. And now check in with yourself. Notice your breathing. Notice the quiet of your room. If you're still here, still walking these halls of iron with me, thank you. If you haven't already, maybe leave a like or subscribe. Think of it as your shield in this little digital fortress we've built together. Looking ahead. We've walked through exile, silence, and the fortress of masculinity, but our journey isn't over. There is one last truth waiting in the shadows, a truth that still echoes today. Societies always draw lines, deciding who belongs inside the walls and who can be cast into the forest. The Vikings knew that death came to every man, but the greater fear was being forgotten. And that's where we'll end, with the echo that still lingers. The Vikings knew something we still feel in our bones. Death comes to every man. But worse than death is being forgotten. The forest. Then, the forest now. For them, the forest was real. A man cast out wandered through pines and birches, snow biting at his skin, eyes scanning the horizon for enemies. For us, the forest is digital. A man cast out wanders through silence, unfollowed, unfriended, accounts deleted. His name removed from headlines. His memory erased with the same cold efficiency. The exile is different in form, but not in spirit. The fear of being erased that sadly never died. Who gets to belong? Every society, ancient or modern, draws a line. Inside the line, protection, honor, memory. Outside the line, silence, exile, erasure. The Vikings used the word arger. We use other words, now labels, hashtags, accusations that spread like wildfire. The forest may no longer be made of trees, but the fear of stepping into it, that fear still keeps many awake at night. The name that lives. But here's the gentler truth. Names live because we choose to carry them. The Havamal promised, cattle die, kinsmen die, one dies oneself. But a noble name never dies if good renown one gets. So let me ask you, whose name do you carry? Whose memory lingers because you still whisper it, even quietly, when no one else does? That, perhaps, is our way of resisting the exile. To keep remembering, to keep speaking, slowing into silence. So as this story drifts to its close, let's take a breath together. Notice your space, the glow of the screen, the blanket around your shoulders. Maybe it's midnight, maybe it's dawn, maybe you're already half asleep, and these words are slipping into dreams. Wherever you are, thank you for being here, for letting me share this quiet hour with you. And if you're still awake, tap, like if this journey kept you company. Subscribe if you want more of these long, slow walks through forgotten history. And, as always, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I read every one, and it amazes me how our little circle spans the world. The final echo. The Vikings believed a man was either a wolf among wolves or prey. But perhaps, in our world, we can choose something gentler. Perhaps we can remember each other not for strength or weakness, not for perfection or failure, but simply for being. Because in the end, that's all any of us want. Not to be rich, not even to live forever, just to be remembered. And so this story ends, but the echo remains in the halls of history, in the forests of silence, and maybe, if you'll carry it with you, in memory. Good night.